The ultimate resource in economic development is people. It is people, not capital or raw materials, that develop an economy. There is little disagreement over the fact that the growth rates in agriculture, large-scale manufacturing and GDP showed astonishing trends over the 10 years between 1958 and 1968. The disagreements exist over the nature and consequences of those growth rates and over an interpretation of the economic policies that formed what the government of the time called the Decade of Development and what its critics have very mildly termed the controversial 60s. Viqar Ahmed and Rashid Amjad argue that this period of rapid economic growth, achieved mainly as a result of the policies pursued, generated a great deal of economic tensions. Increasing disparities in regional income between the provinces, a concentration of industrial economic power, the failure of real wages to increase significantly, and a general belief of increasing income inequality all contributed to the rejection of the Ayubian growth philosophy and strategy. This table shows the impressive performance of the main sectors of the economy. The high growth rates in large-scale manufacturing continued in the first few years of the Ayub regime, with the average for the period 1960 to 65 rising to a phenomenal 16.9%. Even after 1965, when there was a marked slowdown, growth rates in manufacturing still remained above 10%. In industry, it seems that the previous trends maintained during the 1950s continued well into the 1960s. Agriculture presents a marked improvement in the 1960s compared with the dismissal situation in the 1950s. The reasons for this growth were the recognition in the late 1950s that the excessive pro-industrial bias was affecting agriculture very negatively and that a redress was necessary. Some steps were taken, but it was the Green Revolution that was responsible for the very high growth rates of the late 1960s. Although there was a great deal of continuity between 1950s and 1960s, hence the similar levels of growth and development, some critical steps were taken, especially in the trade and exchange rate policies that were the prime movers of the 1950s. The new regime of Ayub Khan disbanded many of the controls that had been imposed following the post-Korean War recession in 1952. In 1959, there was a fundamental reordering and change in the method of directing industrialization through trade policy. A series of liberal policies were introduced that remained in effect till 1965. The main emphasis of the new trade policy in 1959 shifted away from direct controls and towards indirect controls on imports and on domestic prices of other goods. As Lewis shows, a number of measures were taken in import licensing that made market forces more important in determining the commodity composition of imports and the distribution of ownership of import licenses. It was the Export Bonus Scheme or the Bonus Voucher Scheme launched in 1959 that was considered the key to the import liberalization process in Pakistan. The scheme allowed a free market in the bonus vouchers for certain commodities. In addition, the earlier closed and selective import licensing scheme of the 1950s, which was based on the importer's ability to import during the Korean boom of 1950 to 52, was replaced in 1961 by the Open General License, which allowed newcomers to enter the trading sector. The main reason why the government could be so generous in its import policy in the first half of the 1960s was critically linked to the availability of foreign aid, which increased from 2.5% of GNP in the mid-1950s to 7% of GNP in the mid-1960s.
The Export Bonus Scheme was considered to be an innovative device aiding both import substitution and export growth. The scheme transferred a subsidy to exports, and the exports of raw jute fell from 60% of total exports in 1958 to 20% in 1968 to 69, while the exports of cotton and jute textiles increased from 8.3 to 35%, and the exports of other manufacturers increased tenfold. The EBS also had a positive impact on the imports, making raw materials and machinery imports easier and cheaper. In 1965, Pakistan's manufactured exports were greater than the combined manufactured exports of South Korea, Turkey, Thailand, and Indonesia. The Asian Development Bank study shows that the large-scale manufacturing growth increased from 8% per annum from 1955 and 1960 to 17% between 1960 and 65 in the second five-year plan. The controls reimposed following the foreign exchange and aid curtailment caused this growth to fall to about 10% in the second half of the 1960s. The table shows the differences in the three sectors in the 1960s and also shows that the growth rate was much higher in the first half of the decade than in the second half. The most interesting observation that can be made from this table is that the growth in investment goods was by far the highest of all sectors during the early 1960s. The reason, according to the Asian Bank, was that since this sector was most dependent on imported raw materials, it benefited the most from import liberalization. One of the main reasons directing towards economic growth was foreign aid. Keith Griffin said that in the mid-1960s, the entire social and economic system that had been built up was heavily supported and sustained by the foreign assistance. The system which operated in Pakistan came very close to being what we can term as a foreign aid dependent regime, in which the mechanics of industrial growth were in one way or another made dependent on foreign aid inflows. Once these aids stopped, the system not being able to replace foreign aid with other forms of external finance like direct foreign investment, and without the peculiar boost to profitability associated with the local system for dispensing aid, found it difficult to sustain the earlier growth it had generated. The second reason for the economic growth was the growth in the total factor productivity. According to Asad Saeed, productivity growth rates, especially total factor productivity growth, is one measure which reveals the efficiency of factor use. TFP can grow because of improvements in management and organization of firms and because of innovation and improvement in technology. The TFP can be calculated using the following formula. Growth in GDP is equals to growth in labor input plus growth in capital input plus growth in TFP. The growth rates in total factor productivity shown in the table reveal that Pakistan's growth rate of 5.06% was far higher than any comparable countries, indicating both technological dynamism and dynamic allocative efficiency in a comparative perspective.
Another reason that contributed to the growth of Pakistan economy was private sector investment. Papanek, a firm believer in the leading role of capitalism and the private sector, argues that for ideological reasons the United States, Germany, the World Bank and others have been strong advocates of private enterprise. A country that caters to this preference is bound to profit. He considers Pakistan's industrial experience from the 1950s to the mid-1960s to be a success story of private enterprise. But the incentives that foreign aid generated were critical. Thus, foreign aid in association with the private sector was the main instrument in Pakistan's economic growth in the 1960s. Now, let's have a look at the other side of the reality and explore how the economic development led to disparity. Interestingly enough, there is also an explanation of economic development model of 1960s which not only rested its premise on the leading role of the private sector but also justifies increasing inequality and the reasons behind it. It was the doctrine of functional inequality. Functional inequality occurred in the era of Ayub's martial law government policy due to the advice given to the government by the Harvard Advisory Group. This group was in favor of capitalism and advised that resources must be directed toward the industrial sectors that has the high propensity to save, and that agriculture and wages should be at the brunt of this transfer. Now let's talk about the impact of the scheme. Dominant small groups of monopoly houses began to emerge in 1950s in the industrial sector, a trend which accentuated in 1960s. In addition to this, there were 44 monopoly houses which control about 77% of gross fixed asset of all manufacturing companies listed on the Karachi Stock Exchange. These firms together were able to control 35% of all assets of the entire large-scale manufacturing sector and at the same time had close links with the financial sector. Secondly, 7 out of 17 Pakistani banks went under the direct control of the monopoly houses, which accounted for 60% of the total deposit and 50% of loans and savings. Now let's talk about the economic and political disparity that occurred between the East and West of Pakistan. The income disparity between the East and West Pakistan in 1948 was only 10%, but in 1970 it increased to 30%. The reason behind this was that resources were earned by East Pakistan through export of jute and jute textile were all directed back to West Pakistan. It was also obvious that the main reasons for the separation of the East Pakistan were the political and economic policies of the 1960s. To understand the causes for the implementation of these policies by the government, we must understand the concept of social utility of greed. Gutsef Papanek argues that inequality leads to economic growth, but he says that the problem of inequality exists, but its importance must be put in perspective. First of all, the inequalities in income contributed to the growth in the economy, which is beneficial for the lower income groups. Moreover, growth in the economy means cheaper clothes, cheaper food, and more adequate supply for the bulk of population. Greater equality during the early period at the cost of growth would probably have left the poorer groups in the worst position, absolutely, though they would have been better off relatively. This argument holds true, however, it's only because inequalities in the income results in substantial inequalities in savings, not in consumption. Therefore, on the basis of the evidence presented in this video, it can be concluded that the era of 1958 till 1968 was indeed the decade of development, yet it gave birth to disparity in Pakistan.